Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. We are Good One and today we will be presenting our week 11 task on translating and analysis selected excerpts for a Malay short story. Before we begin, let's first introduce ourselves. My name is Ildina and I am the moderator and the culture context researcher for today.
Assalamualaikum everyone. My name is Nur Betrisha and I am the first translator.
My name is Ainur Shafiqah binti Kamaruzaman and I am the secondary translator.
My name is Aisyah Humaira binti Ahmed Faizat and I am the translation reviewer and editor.
And my name is Nur Anisra binti Zaki and I am the literary analyst.
This project aims to develop our translation skills, literary analysis abilities, and understanding of how cultural meanings can be transferred from Malay into English. Throughout this presentation, we will discuss about the author, provide an overview of the selected excerpts, explain our translation strategies, analyze literary elements, and conclude with our individual reflections on the translation process. Before discussing the short story, we would like to introduce the author. The author of this short story is Shapia Muhammad Ramli. He was born on 26 August 1950 in Gunung Semanggol, Perak. Since 1971, he has lived in Johor, where he worked as a teacher at Sekolah Kebangsaan Felda Sungai Sayong Kulai and later at Sekolah Menengah Sultan Ibrahim Kulai. Apart from being an educator, he is also an accomplished Malaysian writer. In 1983, he won third prize in the ESO Gapena Short Story Writing Competition to his short story entitled Paksu. In 1984, he won second prize in the 6th ESO Gapena Short Story Writing Competition to his short story entitled Terasing. He also received consolation prizes in the 7th and 8th ESO Gapena Short Story Writing Competitions. His writing is often known for presenting social criticism and encouraging readers to reflect on social issues through satire, symbolism, and imaginative storytelling. The short story we selected reflects these characteristics because it uses rubbish as a symbol to criticize modern society's habits and values.
Thank you, Dina. And the selected excerpts focus on a strange event that occurs in a town where all the rubbish suddenly disappears. At first, this seems like a miracle because the town has become cleaner. However, instead of celebrating, the garbage workers become worried because rubbish is their source of income and survival. So as the story continues, local authorities become concerned and begin investigating where all the rubbish has gone. Eventually, they discover that the missing rubbish has accumulated into an enormous mountain. Although the story appears humorous and unrealistic, it actually explores serious issues such as consumerism, environmental responsibility, waste management, and economic dependence on pollution. The story encourages readers to question whether modern society has become too dependent on producing waste.
For this task, our group selected two connected excerpts. The first excerpt focuses on the disappearance of rubbish and the reaction of garbage workers. And the second excerpt focuses on the investigation carried out by the district officer and the discovery of a giant mountain of rubbish. We selected this excerpt because they contain rich symbolism, social criticism, and cultural meanings that make them suitable for both translation and literary analysis.
One important passage from our translation is, "Now all the rubbish had disappeared. Where had the rubbish gone?" So this sentence introduces the mystery that drives the story. Another important line is, "Rubbish was their livelihood. They depended on it to survive, support their wives, and raise their children." This shows that the workers do not view rubbish as something dirty or useless. Instead, they see it as something essential for survival. The irony here is that something society considers worthless has become valuable to those whose livelihoods depend on it.
Another important translated passage is the rubbish had become a towering mountain. This sentence marks the climax of the selected excerpt. The image of a giant mountain made entirely of rubbish creates a powerful visual effect. It also prepares readers for the deeper symbolic meaning behind the story. The mountain represents the accumulation of society wastefulness and irresponsible consumption.
While translating the text, we applied several translation energy strategies. The first strategy was maintaining meaning rather than translating word for word. For example, the phrase sampah adalah hidup mati mereka. A literal translation would be garbage is their life and death. Although this is accurate, it sounds unnatural in English. Therefore, we translated it as rubbish was their livelihood. This preserves the intended meaning while sounding more natural to English readers. Another strategy involved preserving the tone of the original story. The author uses exaggeration and irony to criticize society. Therefore, we try to retain these elements in our English translation.
One example is the phrase seolah-olah penduduk bandar berak sampah setiap hari. Literally, this means it was as though the townspeople defecated rubbish every day. Although the phrase sounds unusual, the author intentionally used exaggeration for satirical effect. Therefore, we translated it as it was as if the townspeople excrete rubbish every day. This version preserves more the humor and criticism of the original text. And another example is maintaining consistency in terminology. The original translation alternated between the words garbage, waste, and rubbish. After discussion, we decided to consistently use rubbish throughout most of the text to improve cohesion and readability.
As the translation reviewer and editor, my role was to examine the translation for grammatical accuracy, consistency, clarity, and style. So, one issue I identified was the sentence without garbage, imagine how their lives would come. Although understandable, but it sounds unnatural in English. So we revised it to without rubbish. Imagine what their future lives would be like. This revision improves readability while maintaining the original meaning. I also corrected tense consistency, sentence structure, punctuation, and also vocabulary choices. Furthermore, I also ensured that the translation maintained a consistent narrative voice and flowed smoothly from one excerpt to the next. This editing stage was important because translation quality depends not only on accuracy but also on readability and natural language use. And that is all from me.
Thank you, Aisha. So, after completing our individual translations, our group conducted a peer review discussion. During this process, we focused on four important aspects: meaning, style, cultural references, and cohesion. I would like to begin by asking Tisha about one of the biggest challenges she faced regarding meaning.
One challenge was deciding how closely we should follow the original Malay wording. For example, the phrase sampah adalah hidup mati mereka literally means rubbish is their life and death. Although this translation is accurate, we felt that English readers might find it unusual or confusing. Therefore, we discussed the alternative versions such as rubbish was their livelihood or their survival depended on rubbish. So the challenge for me was balancing accuracy with readability.
I agree with Tisha. If we translated every phrase literally, we might preserve the original wording but lost the intended meaning for English readers. Therefore, we prioritize conveying the author's message rather than translating every word directly. This approach is often called meaning based translation.
From an editor's perspective, preserving meaning is important, but we also need to ensure that the translation sounds neutral too. A translation may be accurate, but if readers struggle to understand it, communication becomes ineffective. That is why our group carefully evaluated whether each sentence communicated the intended message clearly.
Besides meaning, we also discussed about style. Tisha, could you explain the aspect?
The author's writing style combines satire, irony, and exaggeration. For example, the line seolah-olah penduduk bandar berak sampah setiap hari is intentionally exaggerated. The author uses humor to criticize excessive waste production. Because of this, we wanted to preserve the satirical tone in English.
We eventually translated it as it was as if the townspeople excreted rubbish every day. Although the sentence sounds unusual, the original Malay expression is also intentionally shocking. We felt that maintaining the exaggeration was important because it contributes to the author's style.
Um, if we had replaced it with something more neutral, such as they produced a lot of rubbish, readers would lose the humor and criticism present in the original text. Therefore, maintaining style was just as important as maintaining the meaning.
Another issue we discussed involved culture references. As the culture context researcher, I noticed that the story indirectly reflects Malaysian social values. One example is the contrast between traditional community responsibility and modern consumer culture. Although the term gotong royong does not appear directly in the selected excerpt, the story encourages readers to think about community responsibility regarding waste management.
This created an interesting challenge because international readers may not immediately understand the cultural context behind the story. Therefore, we tried to preserve clues within the translation that suggest the social criticism intended by the author.
Finally, we discussed about cohesion.
Cohesion refers to how smoothly the translated text flows from one section to another. Since different group members translated different excerpts, we need we need to ensure the consistency. One issue we identified was inconsistent terminology. Some sections use the word garbage, waste, and rubbish interchangeably. After discussion, we decided to use rubbish consistently throughout most of the translation. This is because it can improve the unity and readability of the translated text.
We also revised sentence structure and tenses to ensure that the excerpt feel like parts of one continuous narrative rather than separate translations.
Overall, this collaborative discussion helped us produce a translation that was accurate, readable, culturally informed, and stylistically consistent.
Also, an important part of the literary translation is understanding how translation choice influence interpretation and reader response. Different translation decision can lead readers to understand the text differently. For example, if we translate sampah adalah hidup mati mereka, literally as rubbish is their life and death, readers might focus on the unusual wording rather than the workers' dependence on rubbish. However, translating it as the rubbish was their livelihood encouraged readers to focus on the economic message.
Similarly, preserving the exaggerated phrase excreted rubbish every day allows readers to experience the satire intended by the author. If we soften the language, the criticism of consumer culture would become less powerful.
Translation choices also affect emotional impact. The story uses strong imagery and dramatic language to encourage readers to reflect on environmental issues. If the translation becomes too formal or too simplified, readers may not feel the same reaction as readers of the original Malay text.
So cultural references also influence interpretation. Readers familiar with Malaysian society may immediately recognize the criticism of modern consumer behavior, while the international readers may interpret the story more generally as commentary on waste and environmental problems.
Therefore, translation is not simply transferring words between language, it's also shaping how readers understand, interpret, and emotionally respond to a text. This is why translation decisions are extremely important when dealing with literary works. And another is the central theme of the story is society dependence on waste on and consumption. Normally, rubbish is viewed as useless. However, in this story, rubbish becomes something valuable because it supports people's livelihoods. The story criticizes economic systems that depend on the continuous consumption and waste production. Another important theme is materialism. The giant mountain of rubbish symbolizes the consequence of excessive consumption and human greed. The story suggests that modern society often values consumption without considering its environmental consequences. And then, the story contains several important characters. First, the garbage workers. They are portrayed as hardworking individuals whose survival depends on waste collection. Rather than a savior in the story, they are presented as the people who trap within a system that requires garbage and rubbish in order to exist. Second, the townspeople. They are portrayed as careless and wasteful. They continuously produce rubbish but fail to take responsibility for its consequence. Third, the district officer. He is portrayed as reactive rather than proactive. He only takes action after a crisis emerges. Through this character, the author critiques different aspects of society. And then, the story used a vivid imagery. For example, the phrase pungent stench appeals to the sense of smell in the story. This olfactory imagery helps readers to imagine the unpleasant environment created by excessive waste. The image of giant rubbish, the image of giant rubbish mountain creates a strong visual imagery. Readers can easily imagine an enormous mountain made entirely of rubbish. The story also used symbolism. Rubbish symbolizes human greed, overconsumption, and environmental neglect. The curtain mentioned in the story symbolizes ignorance and avoidance. When the district officer, the DPTDO, puts aside the curtain, it represents that finally confronting a problem that had long been ignored. The story also contains conflict and setting, which is the external conflict, which is human versus society. Here, the garbage workers fear losing their source of income when the rubbish disappears. This conflict highlights society's dependence on waste producing system. The conflict, the setting is known as Badar Sampah Tebiar, or the town of neglected waste. The setting contributes significantly to the story's satirical atmosphere because a town associated with waste is described as peaceful and ordinary. This contrast reinforces the author's social criticism. Next, I will pass it to Dina for the cultural context.
The story reflects several cultural and social issues relevant to Malaysia. One important aspect is the decline of traditional community values. In Malaysian culture, the concept of gotong royong encouraged collective responsibility and cooperation in maintaining cleanliness. However, the story suggests that these values are becoming less common due to urbanization and consumer culture. People consume more products, produce more waste, and become less connected to communal responsibilities. The story, therefore, serves as a reminder of the importance of environmental awareness and social responsibility. In conclusion, this short story demonstrates how literature can use humor, irony, and symbolism to address serious social issues. Through our translation process, we learn that literary translation involves much more than changing words from one language into another. Translators must consider cultural meanings, literary style, tone, symbolism, and reader expectations. This project helped us to improve our translation skills while developing a deeper appreciation for the relationship between language, culture, and literature. Thank you. We will now proceed with our individual reflections.
For me, this task helped understand that translation is not simply about finding equivalent words. I learned that preserving meaning and tone is equally important. One challenge I faced was deciding whether to translate certain phrases literally or adapt them to sound natural in English.
And for me, through this task, I learned how important collaboration is in translation. Different group members often interpret the same phrase differently, and our discussion helps us produce a stronger final translation. And the biggest challenge was maintaining the final message while ensuring readability.
As the editor, I realized that even accurate translations require refinement. Cultural expressions, sentence structures, and stylistic choices often need adjustment to sound natural in English. This experience improved my awareness of language accuracy and also consistency.
As for me, this project showed me how literary analysis can improve translation quality. Understanding symbolism, imagery, and themes help us to make the story more informed, to help us make more informed translation decisions. I learned that translators must also be a literary readers in order to understand the reader's point of view when reading the story.
As the culture context researcher, I learned that cultural understanding plays an important role in translation. Many meanings are connected to social values and cultural experiences. Without understanding these aspects, important messages can be lost during translation. This does help me appreciate the close relationship between language and culture. Thank you for listening. That's all from us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
Thank
everyone.
you.